broadcast. You're watching Hot Button Issue right here on Choice Television. With me, Timothy Polio. We're going up until 10 o'clock. And later, I'll be taking your calls and we conclude the broadcast with the clip that peaked. There's an issue which has suddenly held the entire nation captive over the last 3 days. I'm referring there to the impact report. You heard from Prime Minister Dr. Kenny Anthony in a much anticipated address to the nation on Sunday, where he made reference to certain aspects of the investigation undertaken by some 8 Jamaican police officers, clearly stating, according to the Prime Minister, that our police officers acted in a very improper manner during the course of Operation Restore Confidence, when there were some 12 police killings, and the United States certainly had a hand in ensuring that there was a thorough investigation, primarily because of the action taken by Washington in deciding to withdraw all forms of assistance to the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. So St. Lucia, the government of St. Lucia, finding itself against its back against the wall, had to do something to kind of appease the United States. Well, the appeasement has not really taken place yet, because that report has been forwarded to the Director of Public Prosecutions, who must now make a determination as to whether the police should be tried for those alleged extrajudicial killings. It's a matter of days, weeks, months, I imagine, before we can come to some final conclusion on this particular issue. But we continue to watch in anticipation of an outcome. In a moment, I'll be introducing my special guest to you. But here now we have a report from Miguel Favre. That report was filed on Monday during the Choice News Now broadcast on the Prime Minister's address to the nation.
During the period 2010 to 2011, 12 individuals lost their lives following encounters with police officers, most occurring in the Castries Basin, attracting the attention of the United States government. This led to the invocation of what is known as the Leahy Law, which points to the denial of assistance to any unit of the security forces of a foreign country if it was found by the Secretary of State to have committed a gross human rights violation. The Kenny Anthony administration subsequently solicited the assistance of officers from the Jamaica Constabulary Force through the CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security, IMPACS, to conduct investigations into all alleged instances of extrajudicial killings.
The report confirms that the blacklists or death lists referenced by the media, human rights organizations, victims, families, and citizens alike did exist. More alarmingly, the investigators report that all the shootings reviewed were fake encounters staged by the police to legitimize their actions. Further, that the weapons supposedly found on the scene of the alleged extrajudicial killings were from sources other than the victims. The investigators say that the weapons were planted on the scene of the shootings. The investigators also advise that a number of shootings were done by police officers and are listed on the murder statistic as being done by unknown assailants.
The report further suggests, according to Dr. Anthony, that the nation's crime problem is facilitated by corrupt politicians, government officials, business persons, and police officers. One area of serious concern by investigators, the Prime Minister noted, was the lack of cooperation by some senior police officers during the course of their investigations.
They reported that the main server of the computers used by some members of the high command of the police force was deliberately tampered with. In 2 instances, the operating systems of the computers were altered to place the supposed contents beyond the timeline of the investigation or probe. The report has also recommended that some senior police officers be held accountable for their actions or for their failure to take appropriate action when the alleged killings occurred.
The investigators pointed to what they referred to as an environment of impunity and permissiveness created by the RSLPF's high command, designed in order to achieve the desired results.
Willful blindness existed in respect of the Commissioner of Police and particular members of his leadership and management team, unquote. The investigators have recommended that, quote, all police officers involved in the unlawful killings of citizens in respect of the files reviewed must be prosecuted, unquote. In all, the investigators made some 31 recommendations, many of which touch on the management and administration of the police force.
Dr. Anthony describes the probe into Operation Restore Confidence as one of the most challenging and difficult issues he's had to confront as Prime Minister. Miguel Favre, Choice News Now.
Report was just filed on Monday evening during the Choice News Now broadcast. And joining Hot Button Issue is a well-known attorney and human rights activist, Mr. Martinez Francois. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Timothy, for inviting me.
What do you thought of the Prime Minister's address to the nation on Sunday?
Yes, I think it was a very sober address. The Prime Minister realizing the severity, the seriousness of the situation, and he did say during the course of the address that this was one of his more difficult addresses to the nation since he became leader of this country, I suppose. So it was very clear to all that we were about to hear some very stark truths, anticipating what was billed as this address.
So therefore, what you made of the content of that address?
The contents were very stark as well. So some of the contents of the address, of course, very, very chilling, very stark, and very sober as well, and even shocking. Of course, some of it very shocking. Some of the descriptions of some of the police actions, very, very shocking.
Such as?
In particular, the supposed staging by the police of shootings, supposed killings by the police, ostensibly by unknown assailants, and it is the job of policemen. So this is very, 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 very frightening. And then also the question of the planting of weapons on corpses that have been shot.
Now, how much credence do you think can be given to those allegations? I know we've heard those charges being made against the police from time to time, but all things considered, how much credence do you think can be given to that report?
Well, as everything else, it is really a report. It is still a bunch of allegations that has to withstand analysis in a court of law, if you know what I mean. Like any other report, for example, a policeman could write a report to his superior officer before he puts forward a charge. It is still a report. Similar to this impacts report, it is still a report. And then you have to go further, which is the next step, to prove the allegations in the report in a court of law.
Some people are suggesting that the allegations were just too damning for the Prime Minister to have revealed them to the St. Lucian public. You think it was necessary that the Prime Minister inform the St. Lucian public about some aspect of the investigation?
I think that the Prime Minister was sort of caught on a horns of a dilemma in a sense that I suppose he had to virtually shock the nation out of its slumber, put it this way, because the consequences of this is very severe, and I suppose he didn't want us to underestimate the extent of the challenge that we face.
But what about the implications with regard to the reputation of the police officers of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force? What about St. Lucia's reputation as well?
Well, I'm not concerned about the reputation of policemen. I'm not concerned about the reputation of St. Lucia. But as Shakespeare says, truth will out. Truth will out. The truth must come out. And as the Prime Minister mentioned in his address, in his conclusion, as Lord Mansfield said, let justice be done, do the heavens fall. This is what justice must be done, or be seen to be done. And you cannot actually paper over justice. It has to be done.
But we don't know whether everything that's in that report is factual. Could be hearsay.
Yes, you're right. A lot of it is a hearsay.
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what I as a lawyer, from what I gather as a lawyer, from the way I analyze it, a lot of what's in that report is really heresy, which basically is inadmissible in a court of law in the first place. A lot of it is heresy.
What are the implications for the Royal St. Lucia Police Force as an entity?
Well, the implications is very dire. Dire is the word. Catastrophic is another word. I mean, there has to be fundamental changes in the police force, and I think some of those changes are on the way. I mean, the Prime Minister may try to pretend otherwise, but it is well known that there has to be a purging of this police force. There has to be, and there will be a purging. I mean, there's no running away from it. The police force, as we know it, must be purged.
You think the police commissioner, Mr. Vernon Fosfar, incidentally is your brother, you think he can become a casualty?
Well, the report, as the Prime Minister said, implicated him. I mean, if you're a leader of an organization, you have to take the responsibility because the buck stops with you. The buck stops with you. As the lead, as a head, you cannot run away from responsibility. You're responsible, as the report rightly suggested.
But this remains an allegation, and it surrounds Operation Restore Confidence, which took place in St. Lucia between 2010 and 2011. Can we, with a degree of certainty, say that there was an order given to the police to shoot and kill certain criminal elements in St. Lucia? Because we do not have the evidence to prove that an order was given by anyone. That will include the current police commissioner. That will also include the then Prime Minister Stephenson King.
Well, my understanding of it, my reading of it, that is to say, is that there was one particular point in that particular point in time, 2010, 2011, when there was a hike in crime. And I suppose the powers that be panicked. They panic, and when they make decisions based on fear and panic, very often it turns out to be the wrong decision. And certain wrong decisions were made, which is basically to abate the crime in any manner necessary, or which is that
But
effect.
Professor, we don't know that for a fact. We don't know that certain decisions were made.
The implication is
The one decision,
the implication is
the
very-
one decision we know that was made was there was Operation Restore Confidence. I mean, you had a task force set up, and that was to maintain law and order. That is how I see it. Now, anything else that took place, such as the killing of individuals, 12 individuals, I don't know if it was something that was orchestrated by any individual. I don't know if it was a fait accompli.
Okay, but Timothy, we had the impacts report. It clearly stated what you doubt in there. There was a policy in place, a policy of extermination of certain elements in the society that were thought to be, causing this crime, this crime wave.
Who will come forward to give the evidence and say, yes, we instituted that particular initiative, and we were looking for a desired result, and we gave the all clear for police officers to shoot and kill certain individuals? Who will testify to that?
Timothy, the report did indicate that there was the so-called the notorious blacklist. There was a blacklist to exterminate certain people. A list was drawn up.
My information
I
is
don't
that
know,
was...
I don't know by whom,
Mhm.
but a list was obviously, the report boiled out. A list was drawn up.
It was suggested that was a list consisting of persons of interest to the police.
No, do not involve yourself in semantics. Persons of interest to the police are persons that when a crime is committed, the police, they are suspects which when a crime is committed. For example, if a crime is committed and the police is questioning somebody, this is a person of interest. But somebody on a blacklist is not a person of interest. And don't get involved in semantics. Get it right. The list was a list to exterminate certain individuals. It was not a, don't let it.
On
it
what
was
basis
not a
are you
list,
saying?
It was
Again,
not. It was not a person. And people must get the concept right. This could not have been a person of interest, because unless you're a suspect, you cannot be a person of interest. In terms of police language or police speak, you cannot be a person of interest unless you are interested.
But on what basis, Mr. Fasal, can we say that this was a death list? On what basis can we say that? Yes, there was a list, but was it a death list?
But Timothy, the investigators said that they were paid, I suppose, handsomely to investigate these matters, and they came to the conclusion that it was. Who am I, or who are you to say otherwise? We have to conclude. Okay, are you second guessing the impacts report? You cannot second guess them. So because we were not doing the investigating, were we? So I don't think you should second guess what and the Prime Minister actually believed them.
The second guessing will be done very shortly by the Director of Public Prosecutions.
The DPP cannot second guess anything. The DPP's role is that if she finds there's sufficient evidence, and by the way, it must be probative evidence, not hearsay. The difference is simply that it must be able to be proven in court. Hearsay cannot be admissible in court. My suspicion is that most of what's in that report is hearsay. Now, to prove that...
So you're agreeing with me then, that the talk of a death list, hearsay?
Yes, it is hearsay.
It's not a fact?
Yes, somebody must... Well, the death list is neither here nor there in terms of culpability, in terms of who should who, you know. Because the list by itself, by definition, cannot shoot anybody. It's a piece of paper. What is really important or significant is the individuals that carried out the shooting.
Can somebody say that it shows motive if you have that so-called death list, and as you go along on your tick, you see 12 names on that death list, and those individuals have been shot and killed? Is there motive?
Motive, but the point is, for example, if I may speak for the DPP just now, the DPP will not, somebody that wants to prosecute this matter, they will be going for individual, specific cases, not who are on which death list. This is neither here nor there, the list itself. All the list tells us is that there was some kind of motive or some kind of plan, you know, but it doesn't say who should who. What is important is who is coming forward to say this person was killed and who shot the person, you know, and then you proceed accordingly. You don't proceed based on a list, because the list is just a list.
You have a gut feeling
because
about this?
you cannot for example, you can't prosecute an entire police force based on a list. You can only prosecute one person at a time, one accused person. You cannot prosecute a whole organization like the police force. So the list...
What about prosecuting a task force?
A task force?
The task force.
You cannot either.
Just put together.
You cannot. You have to find evidence that this person was killed, and by whom? As simple as that. I mean, this is what a court of law would want to know.
There was an inquest which exonerated at least exonerated the police with regard to at least 6 of the 12 killings, 6 or 7 of the 12 killings. Which supersedes the other? Do you think that greater consideration will be given to the outcome of the inquest or to the report, the impacts report?
Well, my understanding of the law is that if there was an inquest and persons were exonerated, okay, given certain evidence, now if new evidence has surfaced, this new evidence can be brought forward in a court of law. It can, if new evidence, in any case, whatever, if there's new evidence, I mean, this is common in legal practice, in any jurisprudence, including our jurisprudence. Even here, in an ordinary murder case, for example, somebody could have been convicted or discharged. In the Court of Appeal, when an appeal is made, you can actually bring, if there's new evidence that has been uncovered, this new evidence is admissible, even if the person has been convicted or discharged. So there is this new evidence test. If what is in the report can meet what I call the new evidence test, this evidence, there's nothing to prevent it from the DPP from bringing it forward.
What is your gut feeling on that issue? How do you think this will end up?
Well, I've said it. This is a bunch of hearsay that is in this report. It is a bunch of hearsay. I don't think the mere fact that inquests have been held in some of these matters, that is not a bar from it continuing. As I said, if there is new evidence. But the way as a lawyer, the way I understand what this report, based on the little that we've heard on it, is that this is a bunch of allegations, a bunch of hearsay. Now, it will be a very tough mountain for the prosecution to climb, to actually put this before any court of law.
But the devil of there's a lot of detail, I'm sure, that was not shared with the St. Lucian public that will be in the substantive document, the substantive report that has been forwarded to the Director of Public Prosecution.
There's a saying, let's pick sense out of nonsense. The Prime Minister did say that a lot of these persons that were interviewed, they were interviewed on condition of anonymity. They don't want their name to be mentioned at all. Now, how on earth are you going to prove a case in court without a face, without names?
But
it's impossible.
You think the Prime Minister had a choice?
Happen?
The Prime Minister had a choice in the matter? Is it a case of deciding not to forward the report to the DPP and taking some other course of action? What are the alternatives? Were there alternatives available to the Prime Minister as far as his course of action in dealing with this matter?
Well, Timothy, this is a very tough. We are in a very tough place in St. Lucia at the moment. This matter is a crisis of historic proportions, right? It is what I consider to be St. Lucia's 9/11, and it is very serious. I don't know how we, as a collective, the Prime Minister is only one man, right? And perhaps his political career, who knows, it's temporary anyway. Now we have to look at this country and the future of this country and how America is going to lift this, almost an embargo on St. Lucia. For now, I cannot see how this, I call it an embargo, how this can be lifted. The steps that the Prime Minister have taken to pass it onto the DPP, the Americans will not be impressed by that. Trust me, they will not be. So we're looking at down a long haul. And of course, we're dealing with the American Congress. It's not just one person, one politician or one leader. You go and whisper into this person's ears as it used to be done in the old days. And we all know how stubborn the American Congress can be, especially now with the Republican majority. They're not gonna budge. Look at what they're saying about Cuba. They're not gonna budge. They are not going to budge, and I don't know how we're gonna get out of it. I just don't know. But what I know is that the steps that we're taking right now is just too little, too late.
What do you think that the government can do
Well,
to appease the Americans? Can they do anything to appease the Americans?
But the Americans have said clearly what they want. I suppose what we can do is to. I haven't read the Leahy law, right? But I think we've got enough persons here, as public servants, that I should read that law with a fine-tooth comb to see whether there's any way out, any loophole that we can use. That's the only way. But to say that this, by taking the minute step that the Prime Minister have taken, by passing the file over to the DPP, this is just like a drop in the ocean.
It's a minor step, but again, I'm pressing you on this issue. What else do you think that the Prime Minister could have done?
Well, if I were the Prime Minister, I wouldn't be here. I'm not the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is the leader of the country. And a leader is supposed to lead when you face tough challenges. You don't just lead when things are fine and dandy. You're supposed to show your mettle when in times of crisis like this.
And in this case, what should the Prime Minister do?
What should the Prime Minister do? I just said it. In my opinion, I would read that law must have a way out for us. Taken literally, in terms of punishing persons, I don't think we can satisfy that test. I don't think we can satisfy that test, which is the literal interpretation of that law, is to punish the individuals and so on. I think there are other things we can do. As I said, we can find other, for example, which I've heard people saying, in the full of a grapevine, which is giving people packages and so on, to giving people we call it golden handshakes, depart the scene and so on. Show the Americans we've done that. For example, you can actually decapitate the entire police hierarchy, which is the top brass. That is one possibility. Decapitate them, send all of them away, and bring new officers, new leaders in the police force. Show the Americans you've done something. Show them how you cannot, based on your laws. Because the Americans respect laws too, They know that we are a nation of laws. We have laws just like them. We have a constitution that we have to respect, just like their constitution. And they respect our sovereignty as well. We have to show them the limitation of what we can do.
But why should we go so far? Just to please the United States, as mighty as it is. Why should we do that?
Well, Timothy, what are our alternatives? Well, do not expect help from them. That's simple. If you don't want to that there's a proverb that comes to mind, an English proverb. He who pays the piper calls the tune. He who pays the piper calls the tune.
You're watching Hot Button Issue. The broadcast will continue in just a moment. Once again, my guest this evening is human rights advocate and attorney, Mr. Martinez Francois. Welcome back and thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching Hot Button Issue right here on Choice Television. And the first segment of the broadcast was brought to you with the very kind compliments of Omega XL, Cadet Distribution and Tiles Plus. My guest this evening is human rights activist and lawyer, Mr. Martinez Francois. What are the political implications, if any, as a result of this impacts investigation?
Oh, I think there are clear implications for both of these political parties that we have here right now. Obviously, the party that was in power at the time of this affair, this sordid affair, would have taken the brunt of the backlash. There is going to be backlash
from the electorate.
Well, let me answer the question. There's going to be political backlash, not only from the electorate, but generally. I mean, even in terms of, I mean, we're talking about the Americans, how they would view these parties, which is very important as well, and other outside entities, how they would view our politicians, because don't forget, even the report mentioned that talked about corrupt politicians. So this is not something that you say lightly. So meaning that our present corrupt politicians, by admission, they're corrupt. So there is going to have to be political backlash, and I think our electorate they are watching. They are watching.
But don't you think, Mr. Foswa, in the main, during Operation Restore Confidence between 2010 and 2011, people were calling for some kind of response from the police, commensurate with the level of criminal activity in St. Lucia, where certain parts of the island were rendered ghost towns, 5:30 in the afternoon, 6 o'clock in the evening, and so on. And we have alleged extrajudicial killings. Let us imagine that the police engaged in those acts. Don't you think that members of the public will say to the police that they did a good job, will feel that the police did a good job, and just maybe in some form or the other might decide to vote along those lines? You don't see that happening?
I disagree. Let me tell you why I disagree. And you're absolutely right.
Because people are not too much into the rights of criminals, quote-unquote criminals.
Let me answer the question. Because I remember very vividly, during that particular time of when these things were happening, Mary Francis and myself, and a few others, we were actually, we were the ones that were speaking against it, right? The fact is, the majority of St. Lucians were supporting it. That's a fact. Just, the thing is that there's a saying that says that, the till must not, there's a saying about, okay, you cannot allow the citizenry to tell you what to do. You're put in a position of leadership, and they take leadership from you. If you are a leader, whether it be the leader of government or leader of a police force, you cannot allow your followers to tell you what to do. You have to do the right thing. They may not know what the right thing is. They are your followers. You are their leader. They're leaders. The second thing is that and it's a fact at the time of this crime situation, the majority of St. Lucians, as I remember, were in favor of it. Now the majority of St. Lucians have turned against the police. Why is that? Because they realize that the police offer the police offer no leadership. They realize that the leadership...
But which poll indicates
Timothy,
that most St. Lucians are against the police on this particular issue?
Yes, Timothy.
Which poll?
If you take a poll, Timothy, let's not get it into semantics. We all live here. It's a fact. Right now, after the Prime Minister's address, most persons have turned against the police but it's all over Facebook. It is on social media. The police are saying that on social media, on Facebook, that now, at the time when they were doing the killing, the police, the people were supporting them. Now things have turned en masse. The people are against them.
But don't you think the case is not against the police, but people are more in support of Prime Minister Dr. Kenny Anthony, and they're in support of their leader?
No. It's support him for what? Why would they support him? They are shocked by what the leader revealed on Sunday. This is what they just they're completely shocked by what the leader revealed. The police were doing to try and solve crime, to ameliorate the crime. That's the difference. It's not the leader they're supporting. It is what the leader told them that was happening, and they realized that this was wrong. That is why they've turned, because they know the difference between wrong from right. That's why they've turned against the police for the wrongs that they were doing.
I think the jury is still out on that. Let's put the telephone number on screen so that you can call right now with your questions and comments. Once again, for my guest, he is Mr. Martinez Francois, a lawyer, and he is also a human rights activist. So we take your calls right now during this segment. We have our first caller line. Good evening, Hot Button Issue, you on the air?
Tim, I'm so happy I got through. Good evening to you.
Good evening to you, caller. You'll have to speak up a bit.
Okay, all right. I have a question for Mr. Francois. And when you asked him a while ago about should you do all that for America, okay? And he said, like, you know, in order for whatever, you know, you have to fall in place for America to help us. And it sounds so much like, you know, when, you know, a woman and a man, you know, like, okay, if you want me to help you, you have to break all rules and to please me for me to help you. That's what he sounds like, okay? And Mr. Francois, you know, are you, okay, as a human rights lawyer, are you gonna, you know, talk about Belinda Joseph? Nothing like that. I don't hear you all talk about that. Why is only for the criminals you all are, you know, you all are standing up for, you know? And Mr. Francois, you need to get your acts together.
All right, thanks a lot for calling. Good evening, Hot Button Issue, you on the air?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening to you, caller.
Yes, good evening. Yes, Timothy, are you hearing me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Francois.
Good evening, madam.
Yes, listen, that debate is very interesting, and I want to focus on a number of periods in the life of St. Lucia and crime. Crime in St. Lucia has impacted not only the police force, our health resources, the fire service, okay? Let me tell you something. If you look at the statistics at Victoria Hospital, in the 90s, okay, early 90s, you could have seen 1 or 2 bullet wounds, okay? By the time it was 1995, we used to have how many gunshot wounds in the hospital? People working round the clock, police, gangs in the place, all these kinds of things. Now, many of them have shoot out each other and these kinds of things. Now, these guys that we have there, one of them, at the age of 16, hammered an old lady, okay, to death. I want Mr. Francois to ask, I want to ask him, how many times these guys have been presented to the courts for murder, for firearm, for drugs? And you know what happened? These fellas, within a week, they're out because they know the law. They know the holes in the system. They get on bail. They tarnish our reputation in Matnik. They tarnish our reputation in Canada. They tarnish our reputation in England. They involve in trafficking drugs. They involve in all of these kinds of things. Tell me the resources that the police has to deal with these correct criminals. I want Mr. Francois to answer that question for me.
Okay.
Number one. Timothy, just now, wait. I have a number of things to think because a lot of us have been impacted by that. The health services, the police, the firemen, all these kinds of things. Now, let me tell you something. Another question I want, the deportees. Okay? The human rights people should write the Americans about how St. Lucia Police Force should deal with deportees who commit crime in St. Lucia, and then our police force with very little resources have to deal with that. When these guys, they rep now with condom, you cannot get the swabs, okay? They rep with condom, they kill with gloves so that you don't get the things. These sellers, they intimidate witnesses and these kinds of things. Why, Mr. Francois? Why, Mr. Francois? What about the rights of the citizens? Our rights to remain in our country, free of crime, free of harassment from criminals. Our properties, Castries, certain areas, things have been devalued because of the gangsters. All right, people's properties cannot be. Let us say, if you have a property around the chaussee and so on, you cannot put things there because people don't want to go there because they want to be shot. You understand me? The rent is higher because certain areas are considered safe than others. In a little country like St. Lucia, you understand me? We have correct criminals. And let me tell you something. The other thing about the relatives of these people who come and they profit from the crime and from the drugs and from the trafficking, I think it is time we put laws here for the families that aid and abet crime. You understand me? We, the human rights lawyers, should write the Americans and tell them, we have young people here who are young offenders, who look up to the gangsters. We need resources to deal with the deportees, to deal with these kinds of things. I do not support the fact that police officers have to put their lives on the line every day and then today being bashed. Okay, I don't support that at all. And politicians might play politics with our national security, whether it's this party or that party, but at the end of the day, the police colors are blue, white, black, and yellow. All right? Blue, white, black, and yellow. We have to stand for blue, white, black, and yellow when it comes to crime in our country. You understand me? And that has to stop. You understand me? We have to say either we are for the criminals or either we are against the criminals. Our resources have been used too much from the 90s with gangs. From the 90s, the hospital has been under siege by these fellas. You understand me? People working the operating room day and night. Our resources, and these fellas walk out of the courthouse because you know what happened? They get the best lawyers and also on. Mr. Faswa, instead of the human rights lawyers writing about policing, you understand me? And not only that, blacklist, I consider that intelligence on criminals. Okay, the same way that we have a list of people who might have sickle cell disease or might have anything, you have information about criminals. And it is time sex offenders put their names, let them see. Criminals, murder, who's been on murder charges, and these kinds of things. And how these fellas get away from the system. And today we have to bash our police officers with little resources. And what about Peters when he was shot dead? What about Remy and he was shot dead? What about the police officers who've been hurt by criminals? These fellas have tarnished our reputation in Martinique, Canada, and everywhere.
Okay,
and
ma'am.
I do not stand for that.
I'll have to thank you so much.
Thank you.
Compelling stuff. What say you?
Well, it doesn't change the fact of what the report said. The report actually indicted the police force. I didn't write the report. The Impacts people wrote the report. It indicted our police force.
Good evening. Hot Button Issue, you on the air?
Timothy.
Good evening to you, caller.
Let me tell you, Timothy.
Good evening to you, sir.
You know some of these fellas that on the witness thing, all of them is criminal. I saw the Jamaican police buying bear to give them. I was there. I did 2 bears.
Okay, caller.
All of them.
All right, we'll have to end it there, sir. Cannot substantiate what you say there, those allegations that you're making there. We have a caller line. Good evening, Hot Button Issue, you on the air?
Yes, hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
It seemed like in line, notwithstanding most of the population seem to support. You will remember from the offset of this thing, I referred to this thing as extrajudicial killing, and that the ghost would come back to hunt. You know what I mean? And it's about bashing nobody. You will also remember that on several occasions on your program, I've stated categorically that a society cannot function without police officers or the institution of police. Notwithstanding, I mean, the reality there is, I also said to him that Vernon Fossois came in pledging to deal with the criminal situation and the crime situation and to deal with the corruption and bad cops within the police force, and that if he did not act, he would be remembered as the one under whom the most questionable killings happened, and he did nothing. This is not a political matter. The police force have been implicated in a very serious issue, one of extrajudicial killing. This is something that took place in Latin America, Honduras, and Nicaragua, and El Salvador during the early 80s and mid-70s. These are death squads. I too have on a number of occasions advocated over your program the need for police officers to be covered by at least $100,000 insurance policy and the practice of the Police Welfare Union trying to look for funds to deal with fallen officers and the relatives and so on and so forth. You see what I'm saying? So therefore, I could in no way be considered as anti-police. What I'm hearing there is that persons seem to recognize either state criminals or street criminals. The point of the matter is this thing has to be taken not emotionally. The situation exists and persons has to be held to account. No, but I do not believe that there were directives given to go out and execute people. I believe overzealous officers reacted to the public cry and therefore they should be held accountable. We are not a society of barbarians. The law enforcement agencies should not turn criminal in so far as dealing with criminals. Police officers, I mean, we have police officers speak. It almost seems as if these guys need a letter of employment. When police officers speak about being demoralized by the judgment of the court, this is not their prerogative. The court free him, be proud, go out and bust him again.
Okay, sir. All right, thanks a lot. Let's move on to another call. Good evening, Hot Button Issue on the air.
Good evening.
Good evening to you, caller.
Good evening, Mr. Fatwa. You know, I've been listening for the past couple of days to all of the hue and cry and the fallout from the impacts report. And I'm one of those persons, while I may not necessarily question the results of the report, I am very curious. I just find it's unsettling for me. The fact that the Prime Minister would have come out and say the things that he said on Sunday with regard to what is contained within the impacts report. And I say this because at the end of the day, you're making statements about politicians, corrupt government officials, and I assume that the two are separate. Right? You're talking about corrupt businessmen, right? And you're talking about corrupt police officers, a corrupt police force. And I'm thinking, okay, is that why you took so long, to say what's in the impact? To me, if that is what is contained within the report, then there should have been a better way to deal with it. And I hear people bashing the leader of opposition, saying that, the government, in fact, is saying that she said to release it, and now she's saying they shouldn't release it. I don't necessarily think that when she said they should release it, that she meant to come out and say what the Prime Minister said. I think, from what I gathered, is that, okay, you have the report is available, you have been saying that you're going to let it out. On 2 occasions, you said you're going to release, and you did not. So stop vacillating and put out the report out there. If it is that the report, there are people contained fingered within the report that need to be prosecuted, do so. Take it to the DPP, hand it over to the DPP, and do so. I don't think that what the Prime Minister did, coming out and saying that there is a corrupt police force or whatever, was necessarily the right way to go. Tonight I was listening to your newscast, Timothy, and I listened to the guys who were talking, and I'm like, okay, so, can the criminals or the other people who think that they were on the hit list, who saw their names on a list purporting to be a death list or a hit list, could they now come out and say, you know what, when the police now, they engage in whatever activities that may be contrary to our laws, can they now retaliate and say, okay, well, you did it to us, similar to the guy who said, you have guns and we have guns, and then a police officer lost his life. I mean, these are all of the things that we have to be concerned about, and I think the Prime Minister was a little reckless in his statements. Okay. I mean, we had, Timothy, just one moment.
Quickly, please.
We had the incident with the Gobats, who said that we had a corrupt force, and that the Prime Minister had told them that we had a corrupt force and whatever, and we demanded that they retracted, and a member of their family retracted that, and now you're coming back out and say that there is a corrupt, our police force is corrupt. What does that do for our image outside of St. Lucia, on the international, internationally with our investors and whatnot? I just think that it was a bit reckless. I am not in a position to say that the report or what the contents of the report, or make a comment on the contents of the report. But however, I find the way and the things that the Prime Minister said was a bit reckless. And really it should not have been. And one thing that I would like to know is, why is it that the office of the parliamentary office of the Leader of Opposition has not yet received a copy of impacts? Doesn't that office, as a parliamentary office, deserve a copy of that?
Okay, thanks a lot. Just so there from Ms. Laura Japierre, who is the mobilization officer of the opposition United Workers' Party's organization, WIA, that's WIA. Any reaction from you, sir?
Not really, Timothy.
We have another call. Good evening. You're watching Hot Button Issue on Choice Television. Hello, good evening. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Hi, I would just like to say, this is not about if you're for the police or if you're for criminals. This is a human rights case. We need to see this through. We need to... That's all I want to say. This is not about the police. It's not about the criminals. This is about a human rights case, people.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening.
Yes, good night, Jim.
Hi, good night to you, sir.
Mr. Foswa.
Good night, sir.
Mr. Foswa, I suspect I probably have some difficulty with understanding the meaning of fact. So, can you assist me with what fact means? Because you made a statement earlier on indicating that, you know, the majority of the public, okay, members of the public, are now against the police, and that is a fact. So maybe I do not understand what fact is, what a fact is. So can you? I have some other questions for you. I want to go into the impact report, but can you tell me what a fact is?
Okay, caller. Let's just move on. Let's move on to your second. Let's move on to your second point.
Okay, Mr. Foswa, as a lawyer, do you, and I would think that you are familiar with court procedures and so on. You've been around, you've been around the courts and so on. Can you tell me how this impact report can be used, okay, in the court?
What say you, sir?
And also, walk us through the method or the mode of bringing cases, and you can probably tell us if in all of the cases that the DPP has had to deal with, whether you have heard any of the matters investigated being discussed, okay, over the media or information coming out regarding the investigations prior to the matter going before the court.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Well, in terms of this impacts report, there has not been any charges before the courts. So I suppose that is why we can discuss it, because there has not been, it's still an investigation. So it can be discussed if a matter is before the courts, as in a sense that if somebody is charged, then it becomes sub judice. But as of now, this impacts report, there has been no charges, nobody has been charged. It's just an investigation. We have the freedom of expression under the Constitution to discuss it.
Good evening. Hot Button Issue, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hi, good evening to you, caller. You're on the air.
Good evening, Jim.
Yes, good evening to you, sir.
Jim, I want to take something into, I don't know, I don't want to dwell on it too long. We in St. Lucia, and we know of the Jamaicans with regards to this report coming from the investigation. How a witness can investigate another witness? I want Mr. Safaswa to dwell on that. St. Lucia has been, there are allegations made against St. Lucians. As we know, allegations have been made against Jamaica, where a certain person who is now in America, in the United States, in prison, there was allegations made against him that he was in St. Lucia, and certain our policemen have.
I think that has been denied, you know. Caller, I think that has been denied. Sir, hello? I'm saying to you that this has been denied.
The Jamaicans are involved in the same set of allegations. Why not Canada, England, or the United States themselves didn't investigate that? Let me hear something from you, Mr. Faso, about that. How this investigation can go in this form?
Okay, thanks a lot, sir. Our final call. Hot button issue, you on the air?
Yes, good evening, Tim.
Good evening to you, caller.
Good evening to you again.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Tim, I want to ask about 3 questions. Number 1, do you believe that the report was tampered with
Is the first one I will say to this?
by the government?
Hold on, what's say to this?
Well, I have no such information or evidence, so I cannot speak to that.
But caller, why would you ask that question?
Oh, because Tim, I am saying that this report takes so long to come out, and the report being delayed and delayed and delayed.
Caller, I don't think that's sufficient reason for you to say that the report was tampered with. Could be for a multiplicity of reasons. I think you're just
Tim,
choosing.
I come into that.
No, caller, you're just choosing to come to that conclusion for whatever reason. But
No,
I do not
Tim, but I
think
come into
that we
that.
have sufficient evidence to say that the report was tampered with. I don't think we should be engaging in that kind of
No, but
exercise.
Tim, hold on, Tim. Because Tim, I am saying that because of that. Because Tim, what we are saying, we are hearing that there are so many other parties that was involved, and why you target the police as a government? Is it you have some hatred against the police that you cannot forgive them? Because Tim, I'm listening to the report. Okay, we heard that businessmen involved, politicians involved. We have parliamentarians involved.
No, parliamentarians, politicians, sir.
Oh, okay, politicians. Okay, so Tim, I am saying that if so many people are involved, why target the police officers alone?
Okay, hold that point. What say you, sir?
I mean, the Prime Minister really has to be careful. You simply cannot mention names, and he did the right thing. He didn't mention any names. Because if you mention somebody's name out there, and you cannot prove what you have said about this person, it is just an allegation. You could be sued in a court of libel for libel. So the Prime Minister is a lawyer. He understands the legal implications of this. You cannot go out there putting people's names out there based on allegations, which you cannot prove. So he cannot do it. And you realize he didn't mention one single name, except the Commissioner of Police.
So Mr. Faswa, what you are saying...
He's a lawyer, so he knows exactly what he was doing.
So Mr. Faswa, what you are saying is that everything that is on that report is based on allegations.
Well, allegations that has to be proved. Somebody has to take this before the courts and I suppose investigate further. I think that the most this report has done is to give us leads, I suppose. Then somebody, I don't know who, from the police force, have to go further now and follow these leads and prosecute those persons if they find evidence. That's what it is.
So understanding you, Mr. Faswa, is saying that that report, we should not give credence to it or should not give any pondering to that report. Lazo is just a flat report then.
This report, to my mind, is an eye-opener. It's an eye-opener. It showed us certain things were exposed. To me, that is all this report is really, that is all the utility of that report. It's to expose certain things. You cannot use that report as a basis for any liability or any criminal liability on the part of any person.
No,
that's why the Prime Minister didn't mention any names.
Mr. Faswa, no.
How can you mention somebody's name on something like that? This person is corrupt. And you cannot prove in minute detail this particular act of corruption. Then you're exposing yourself to a court of libel court.
Mr. Faswa, with all due respect, sir, I do not see that report as an eye-opener. I see that report as some report that the government of St. Lucia and the people of St. Lucia pay to do just to either target the police, to prevent the police from policing our country. Because, Mr. Faswa, I know you was in St. Lucia, let's say about 5 years ago. What was happening to St. Lucia? How St. Lucia was becoming an Iran and Iraq country. And I know all of us was scared and concerned about St. Lucia, and I believe that the Prime Minister should have should be more careful, in other words, to release what he released there before he target the police and show the police as though there is something against
Okay,
him.
but caller, the Prime Minister did not author the report. So why are you firing those salvos at him? He did not author the report.
But
he merely read the report to the St. Lucian public, or part of the report to the St. Lucian public.
Okay, Mr. Polio, you're quite correct, Mr. Polio. He read part of the report. So, Mr. Polio, if you are reading a report, what you do, you read the report and explain the report in its entirety. But you don't take a report and then you remove section of it and have inquiring minds wondering, okay, was that report tampered with? Did they modify anything on that report and come and just target one set of people? No, Mr. Polio, it is not right for the police. It is not good. It is not fair for the police. And I believe that we should treat the police officers of this country better, because these are men day to day.
Men and women.
Men and women day to day, and putting their lives at risk against criminal and all kind of persons, and trying to safeguard and secure you and I, Mr. Polio and Mr. Martinez Francois, in our school, our children, because you can recall that even our children, the criminals was targeting at one time. You can remember, because it's been broadcast over the news, what was happening to the little children by criminals. Little children get shot by stray bullets. I can tell you, Mr. Polio, I am not pleased with the way that the government deal with that report. Thank you very much.
Okay,
sir.
thank you so much. Final comments from you, Mr. Faswa.
I think that it is a wake-up call for us in St. Lucia, and I hope that we are going to learn from this situation, this crisis. As I said, it is, to me, it's a crisis of historic proportions. I can't recall a crisis of this magnitude in the history of St. Lucia. This is how serious it is. We have the Americans, placing our country, as the Prime Minister said, as a pariah state. A state where there is some, you can call it an embargo on St. Lucia by the mighty Americans. And this is not a nice place to be. And we all should be very concerned about it. It's very serious.
Thank you so much, sir, for being my guest on this evening's Hot Button Issue. As always, thank you so much for watching the broadcast and contributing via your calls. If it's Wednesday, we discuss a hot button issue right here on Choice Television. Time now for the clip. At Pete.
Sorry, you are our student.
Our classmate, our friend. You are a gift for such a short life. We wish we had more time together. You were planted on earth to bloom in heaven. Enjoy being until we meet again.
That's the broadcast once again. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Timothy Polio. Good night.